Hey, everybody, welcome back to the NautZone here on the Sports Not YouTube channel, or if you're following us on X, wherever you're watching us on Facebook. Thanks for being with us. We are a show talking about the NFL, and I'm coming to you live from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. My name is Scott Branson, along with my co-host, Mr. Ryan Dyrud. He's the founder of the LA Football Network. He is in Los Angeles, nursing a head cold, right? Ryan, are you feeling better, man? You sound better today than you did, I should say, this afternoon than you did earlier this morning.
Yeah, our morning 7:30 a.m. call is bad on my voice, regardless of being sick. So it's way worse then. But yeah, I'm feeling a little better. It's been a fun week, but wish I was with you in Indy. I know you're doing great work out there. Excited to jump into it with you. Since the Rams obviously are not in Indy, as they never are, I'm representing them out here in LA. So we can get some info on them.
Yeah, it's interesting times here, and we're going to go over all of that, get you up to speed on the latest news and the latest rumors. Do us a favor, though, before we start in on that. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notifications bell. Also, do us a favor and give us a thumbs up if you like the content. We certainly appreciate that. We are here every week on Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So we are taking you home during your afternoon. We certainly appreciate you guys being with us and talking about the NFL. All right, Ryan. So being here today, this is, as you know, having attended in the past, it's a day-by-day situation. You see, and things start to happen. Yesterday, we had a lot of time with GMs and coaches, those that were here. Like you mentioned, the Rams are not here at all, but we also heard from a lot of the GMs around, and they create some news, right? And the interesting thing, and this is the one thing I want to tell people, is when you're talking about the NFL Combine, and you have these coaches, these GMs speaking to all this big throng of media, because there's a lot of us here, right? It's almost more like a media convention than anything else.
Yeah.
And you hear them talking, and you have to remember, they're not going to give you really anything insightful that's going to give away what their plans are for the draft, because that's what the Combine's about, is setting up and finalizing kind of their draft thoughts as they evaluate these players who they've been watching on tapes for years, in many cases. But they're also not going, or I should say, they're also going to use it, that microphone, as a way to leverage. There's a lot of negotiations going on right now with free agents, with contract extensions, all sort trades. Those things start to come together here at the NFL Combine. So you hear that, and you hear the New York Giants talk about, well, Saquon Barkley, they said last week, yeah, we're not going to franchise tag him. Then Joe Schlo comes in from exit stage right, comes in and says, well, you know what? Nothing's off the table. Yeah, the tag's not off the table. So that is a clear shot at the agent to say, hey, we need to talk more seriously. So you see a lot of that. You see a lot of purposeful comments that seem a little vague, but for the right people, they are the right line, and you hear them. So that's always interesting. And I don't know if you experience that when you hear it too, but I find it very fascinating to kind of, you have to read between the lines a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely a chess match out there in terms of how they answer questions. These guys are smart. I mean, they know what they're doing, and they know kind of how to massage the media questions. I do find it interesting, though, and this is what we'll get into with you being there right now, is there is every now and then, though, where you get called a slip up or whatever, where there's a bit of information we're like, oh, that's actually pretty insightful. I'm surprised you shared that with me.
Yeah.
I know yesterday the Chargers GM knew Joe Ortiz didn't give a lot away, but was asked about, we had an article up on LAFB about it, about kind of his draft philosophy and what to do with the number 5 pick. And, he didn't come out and say like, oh, we're trading it, but you could kind of get some sense of his thought process and what that will look like and what they're looking like in drafting. So there are times, Scott, when they do kind of actually give some good tidbits, and then there are times when they just give you absolute, coaches and GM speak that you're never going to actually be able to do anything with. But have you seen any of those, like kind of oh, okay, here's a little tidbit we can use?
There was some. I think we got one today. As a matter of fact, we were down with Matt Johnson and I from Sportsnet. We're down with the media for Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets, who said right there that he's given permission to Zach Wilson and his agent to seek a trade. So that was boom. It had been suspected clearly after what happened last year, but I think now it's out in the open. So he pops that out, and you're like, whoa, that's actually news.
Yeah.
so you're kind of taken aback by that, but it's good stuff. And then yesterday, your Broncos,
I was going to say,
Sean Payton put on a master class in filibustering. Like, he was asked a question about quarterbacks, and they have about 10 to 15 minutes that they're up on the podium, right? And everybody's asking questions, and you get the whole national media there, so it's not just Denver folks. And he gave like a 4-minute answer on the quarterback situation, and I'm thinking there, he wasn't really saying much. He was getting in shots about how quarterbacks of smaller stature, so I think he was taking some shots at Russell Wilson in between, because
and us too as well, I guess.
Correct. And Sean Payton loves him from Sean Payton, right? And so you could kind of feel that coming from him as well. But man, he went on and on and on and on, and you're like, this is smart, because then he's only got to answer 3 questions.
Yeah.
He's doing it 4 minutes a pop, and he did get to more substantive stuff a little bit later. But yeah, you see that, and of course the GMs. It's just interesting to me too, if I could be self-critical on us or the media, is some of the questions are just like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
Like, where, have you been locked in a hole for a year? Or what's going on up here? What books do you read? What? Like,
Yeah.
It's not a psychology test. So what books do you read? And then some, strange questions like this question about, hey, have you met with this team? Well, assume they're all meeting with the teams for the most part, right? I mean, unless there's some high caliber player who you're not sure who's interested. But in the most cases, it's pretty. So there's not really anything of a surprise here, except for like what you said. Here's the question I want to ask you, Ryan, which is, because I'm hearing this more and more here this year, which is like, does this really need to be done anymore? Because talking to people from the teams, I got to a ripe number of 90%. 90% of what we do around a player is done before we even get here. So
yeah.
Is it maybe 10% at the combine? Yeah, you can see if they can really run, right? And even though they're not in pads or any of that kind of stuff. So it's not like the combine switches their mind. Now, you do see people like Anthony Richardson last year who improved their stock. That happens, there's no question. But I think overall, a lot of this is, well, do you really need to do this anymore? When it first started, it was necessary, but now with technology, tapes, pro days, the ability for more teams to have scouting in college areas, so they see these people in person all the time. And now it's become a fan event too, starting tomorrow, right? So fans can come watch. So there's that. I don't know that the NFL will give it up because of that, but more increasingly, we saw the quarterbacks, right? All the big quarterbacks are not going to be throwing here. They're coming for interviews and media availability, but that's it. So that's the question I have for you. I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but I think the NFL teams themselves are kind of like, we use it more as like a convention. It's not really about evaluating the players.
Yeah. I mean, as a media person, I don't want to see it go away because it's a fun week. I feel like the media use it as just a week to go out and booze and network, essentially. Because even like we said at the top of the hour, the stories are kind of like, they're few and far between. It's more of just to like network, see old friends and hang out and get a play and stuff.
Yeah.
For the teams, I mean, there really is no point. I mean, to be honest, since COVID, they figured out that they can do it without it, because obviously it didn't happen during the COVID year. With technology now, with all the pro days, and most of these players, the top ones, opt to do more of their stuff at the pro day than they do at the combine, where they're comfortable with all the interviews you can do and all that remotely. Because if you remember, Scott, I mean, it may have even just been before COVID. I'm trying to think back, but media used to not even be invited to the combine. It was scouts, GMs, and like NFL.com media. But like I remember watching it, and it was just like they would show, because now, as I mentioned, I think on the last show, all the suites, which you'll see tomorrow when the drills start, all the suites are each a team suite. It used to be they would just sit in the stands. Now it's the media and the fans in the stands and the teams in the suites. So it's become a media convention, like you mentioned, a fanfare. They have a fan fest on the weekend, similar to what they do at the Super Bowl. But team specifically, I mean, there really is no point. So I don't, because this always comes back to money. I don't think the NFL will ever get rid of it, because they can generate money now with the fanfare and with the TV coverage they get from it. I mean, it's a huge event. But from just what the teams want, I bet there would be very few teams that say they find it valuable. And more, I mean, what is there, 7 coaches missing this year? It used to just be Sean McVay. Now I think there's like 7 or 8 coaches not there, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because even from the media perspective, and you hit on that kind of being a convention for us and sort of a networking event in some ways.
Slippery noodle. Gotta go.
Is the fact that the media availability is tough too, because you're crowded into a room, and there's just podium, podium, podium. And then today you had podium, 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 and tables, right? So you had players there. And so it's very hard. I was sharing with you earlier, I was trying to get some video for SportsNaut, and you can't get the sound. Joe Douglas of the Jets it reminds me of the low speaker Seinfeld episode, right? Where you can't hear them. They're so quiet speaking. You can't. And so you're trying to get video, and of course it's New York media, right? So there's like 50 people who actually work in New York that are up front, and you're in the back trying to get some good stuff too. So it makes it hard. And then from a player perspective, you don't really get availability with the players other than those big scrums. And scrums are good, but so you have to think about like how much do you really get out of it. I think for some teams, if you're a beat writer or whatnot, obviously you get, for example, the Raiders today had an invite only for like 4 or 5 of the beat guys to go talk to Antonio Pierce because he did not speak to the media publicly. And so you're like, okay, so those are good for the guys who are doing, or the women who are doing the job day to day on those type of beats. But the rest of it's really interesting. And then of course today, what was some of the news coming out of the today, we talked about Zach Wilson and getting traded. We also are continuing to hear growing buzz, and this is even in hallway talk, Ryan, as I'm walking around the facility, about Justin Fields to Atlanta. Justin Fields, I guess, posted a video, but then there's a lot of people who are sourcing it saying that it looks like the Falcons and the Bears are in deep talks about Justin Fields. So we heard yesterday from GM Ryan Poles of the Bears that they were being transparent with Justin Fields, and they were going to try to get something done before free agency started to give him a better opportunity and maybe lock up a team before they start looking in free agency. So it sounds like Atlanta right now is on the board for him, and a distinct possibility. That's what NBC Sports in Chicago is reporting. And to me, it seems like a good fit.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk and speculation like that ever since the season ended. With the new head coach Raheem Morris, brings over Zach Robinson and Jimmy Lake from the Rams with him as his OC in DC. I think it'd be a perfect scenario for Justin Fields. Gets a fresh start, has a new upstart coach that I think is a great leader in Raheem Morris. We know him well out here in LA. No one could speak any ill will on just the man he is, the character he is, the leadership qualities he have. And I think Justin Fields, we all know that the talent's there. There's obviously some metrics and deficiencies that need to get corrected that he's shown over his first 3 seasons. But some of it, he might just need good leadership and good, I'm not saying necessarily a role model, but a good someone to point him in the right direction to get his career kind of on the path that he wants to go. So of all the scenarios out there, I think, in my opinion, unequivocally, he needs to be done in Chicago. I mean, you can't. Yeah. I get what Chicago's doing. Like they need to, they need to raise his draft. They need to raise his trade stock. I get what they're doing, but if you're have that much waffling and not committing, like it's hard for you as a player to be like, yeah, I'm one here. Like one more bad year, even if they stick him back this year, he has a bad year again, he's done. So like, why would he? He needs to just go somewhere new. So if I'm Chicago, I'm moving on. If I'm him, I'm moving on. And of all the teams out there, I think Atlanta makes the absolute most sense. You look at the weapons, Scott. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Like he'll go from Chicago where no weapons his rookie year. Last year, they did get DJ Moore, but, still not a great offensive core. Better. Yeah. But now you go to Atlanta where you would have Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Like you go from like driving like a Ford Pinto to a Ferrari basically with that. So that alone is going to be, anyone's going to be a better quarterback when those are your options around you. So I think it's a home run fit. What do you think?
I do too. And not only that, but he's from there. He's from Kennesaw, Georgia. So he's going home. And so I think that city and Atlanta's always been and still is a great sports town. And so I think they would rally around Justin Fields, and then he can get to the real work, which is, figuring out his game as he enters into a year. Now, the Falcons are going to have to guarantee or exercise his option, I should say, on May 2nd, if they go get him. So they'll be committed to him for 2 years. But I think it's a no-brainer for them. And I do appreciate, at least from the outside and everything we've heard, I do appreciate the way the Bears have handled it with him. They've keeping it private, but they've told us that, no, we talk to him all the time. He knows what's going on. So it's not like he's in the dark and just waiting to get traded and feels betrayed. No, they're sharing with him, hey, look, we want to give you an opportunity. We want a new opportunity, because they're going to take Caleb Williams. If you don't think they're going to take Caleb Williams, just send me $100 now, because you're wrong. And so that he knows what's going on. He's a smart kid. So it's a good situation. So we'll see what happens. And if that consummates before, because a lot of these trades, they can't be official until March 14th, but this is where we start to hear about them. So we could hear that as being somewhat final, or that they've agreed in principle here before the week's over. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Go ahead.
Real quick, Scott, just on that before you give us more info. Has there been any chatter at all, or just more of your opinion, I guess? We talked last week about, I think one of the perfect fits for Russell Wilson, which I think we'll probably get to here in a minute anyway, is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Has there been any chatter of maybe Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because I think Mike Tomlin, obviously, great, stable head coach, great organization. And you look at Arthur Smith, you look what he did with Ryan Tannehill, with kind of a run-first mentality quarterback, with the run game that they had in Tennessee before he became the Falcons head coach.
Yeah.
That could be a fit. Has that been talked about at all, or is it pretty much looking like it's the Falcons or bust almost?
It's to me, yeah. I've not heard anything else but the Falcons, and I've not heard anything else. And talked to one person who's really, really well connected, and he told me, he's like Russell in Pittsburgh is where it's at. Now, he didn't say it's for sure going to happen, but he felt like that was where Wilson would end up. Tomlin knows how to handle personalities. Obviously, he's had plenty of them, and Russell Wilson wants to walk in as the starter and in a situation where he thinks he can win. Now, I think Atlanta would be good too for that. So if they can't if they can't get Justin Fields, then I could see that, because Russell Wilson would allow you to go for it for a couple years and then start to think about a younger quarterback later as you address some of the other issues the Falcons have. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, not a ton of chatter on Russell Wilson here other than that. We did hear today from Chris Greer, the GM of the Miami Dolphins, that they are in talks with Tua Tagovailoa about an extension, rumored to be about 50 million or so per. And it surprises me a little bit, because listen, I've always, I guess the word I'll use is, rooted for Tua, but I think we saw some of his deficiencies. Even though he led the league in passing with 4,600 yards, he had 29 touchdowns, all of that kind of stuff, and they were 11-6. But I still worry about his ability to stay healthy and to kind of win big games, because they struggled at that last year. The whole team did, but also Tua did as well. So, but they appear all in on that. Are you surprised by that at all?
A little bit. Again, I'm the same way. Love Tua. I think he's a great guy. Love his story. Rooting for him. But you have to look at and I want to say this correctly, but I don't want to say he's a product of the system, but because he's a good quarterback regardless. I think he's a good quarterback. But is he elevating the offense, or is the offense elevating him?
Yeah.
I think is what I'm trying to say. And you look at the offense, the scheme with the coach there, the weapons, obviously, that they have. And is it a system that, hey, plug anyone in, we're going to get 4,500 yards out of this quarterback just because of what we're doing here? Or is Tua rising it to the next level? And I think it's kind of the former. Nothing against him. I just think plug in Justin Fields, plug in Brad Johnson from 20 years ago. Like, he may be thrown for 4,500 yards in that offense. So that is, I think, why Scott, of his draft class, he's going to be the last one to be extended. I mean, both Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow were extended last year before their fifth-year option kicked in. And now Tua is about to hit his fifth-year option, and they're talking about extension before that actually starts. So I think they were saying the same things. Like, can he elevate this offense, or are we a plug-and-play spot right now, and should we reset that with a young quarterback? Clearly, it seems like they're on him. And, I think there's a fear in this league, rightfully so, that if you don't have your quarterback locked up, you're in quarterback purgatory. I mean, look at the Denver Broncos. You can go down the list of teams that are in that purgatory, and you do not want to be in that. So as long as I think you have a quarterback that can start at least 14 games out of the year and put up decent numbers, you kind of have to lock them in. You're kind of forced to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important too, because I still interact with a lot of readers and a lot of viewers who, no, you got to build your offensive line first. It's like, it doesn't matter if you don't have the quarterback. And there's a lot of trepidation about trading draft picks, whether you're the Vikings trying to trade up, or you're the Broncos trying to trade up because they don't have much capital. The Raiders trying to trade up, and people are like, well, I don't want to give up 2 number ones and a number 2. And it's like,
who cares?
It doesn't matter. You need the quarterback, because but 40% of first round quarterbacks never make it. But again, look at the playoffs this year, Ryan. All but one of those quarterbacks was a first round quarterback. So then my question that my good friend Mo Moten, my co-host on my Raiders show, brought up is like, well, okay, so 40% of first-round quarterbacks never make it. What's the percentage of second-round quarterbacks that make it? 10, right? So
Yeah.
so it doesn't get better as you move down. A lot of people think, well, you can get an offensive lineman in the first round, and then second round you could take a Bo Nix or whatever. And listen, he might be a great quarterback. So might Michael Penix Jr. if they fall into the second round. But it's not the same. You have to go all in on your guy, and it's going to cost you. Nothing comes cheap.
Yep. No, I used to be that other way of thinking, Scott, where it's like, okay, no, let's build. We'll find the quarterback later. And I a lot of that, what was it now? 8 years ago when the Broncos won Super Bowl 50.
Yeah.
And they won it on the backs of a great defense and a solid foundation on offense and a Peyton Manning that had the Peyton Manning brain, but was not Peyton Manning the quarterback. So I was like, you know what? The Broncos are proof. You can have mediocre quarterback play if you build out the rest of your roster.
Mm-hmm.
But that so rarely happens. And we've clearly seen from Tom Brady and now Pat Mahomes that if you're a star quarterback, the rest kind of doesn't matter. You need a good defense and then a star quarterback, and you can drive the rest. And so I completely agree. Like, if just bring it back to the Broncos, like if I truly believe in one of these quarterbacks, which it seems like Sean Payton loves JJ McCarthy, I obviously love Caleb Williams, but they're not moving up to 1. I'm giving the bank to go get him. I'm not waiting, because who's to say they sit pat, and this goes for any team, not just the Broncos, goes for the Raiders at 11, or Raiders at 13, Vikings at 11. Who's to say you say, okay, you know what? Let's get Joe Alt. We'll get our tackle of the future, and we'll wait and address quarterback next year. We may have the draft class from 2016 with terrible quarterbacks. I mean, you're going to take that chance, or do you go get your guy now and then build around him over the next 5 years on his rookie contract, lock him up, and you're set for the next 15 years. So
that's it. I mean, listen, it's the most important position. It's the most expensive position, right? Because they go together. And so if that's your most expensive position, you have to, and that's what the Chiefs did. You want to talk about this little mini dynasty they have, if you want to call it mini. It's because that's what they did. And then they locked up Mahomes, and now they're going to renegotiate for Mahomes this year so they can free up another $35 million because he's game to do it and to structure it that way. So they're able to put that together. It's when you start to do things the opposite way, you have to go get the guy you want. If he's there, then you pay what you pay, within reason. You don't go crazy, but you pay what you pay because it is a quarterback league. Defenses win championships. Yes, they do, but so do offenses, and it's complementary football. And in today's NFL, if you don't have a difference maker at quarterback, you're already behind. You can look at it across the league. There's some good teams who don't have great quarterbacks, and they just can't get over the hump. And so I think that that's going to be interesting to see what these teams are able to do, and if Tua turns into that. It doesn't appear that he's going to be that, but we'll see. And go ahead.
Sorry, the last thing I'll say on that. Sorry, I get long-winded on these. I love talking about quarterbacks. But the last thing you have to do, too, as an organization, because a lot of fans and media even say this, like, well, if you draft a quarterback in the wrong situation, you're going to break them, you're going to ruin their trajectory and whatnot, which, is possible. But that's where you, as an organization, I give the Buffalo Bills a lot of credit. They're a good case study here. Like, you have to come in when you find your guy, and you're like, all right, we are unequivocally committed to this system, to this guy for at least 2 to 3 years, sometimes even 4. And it's going to be bad before it gets better, because so many times you give up, you draft that quarterback. If they're bad rookie year, fans are calling to cut bait, get rid of them. The GM fires the coach. The GM gets fired 2 years later. The Bills are one team. Now, they haven't won the Super Bowl, but they're the one team that Josh Allen's first 2 years were not good. He looked terrible. I mean, he was at 48% completion percentage his rookie year, give or take, and like 53% his second year. Now he's MVP caliber every single year because they committed unequivocally to him and to Sean McDermott as a tie-in. And right, wrong, or indifferent, they're now a good team every single year. They haven't won it, but they're good. So you have to have that mentality where we're committed for at least 2 to 3 years, and you can't just cut bait if things go bad right off the start.
In fact, yesterday here at the Combine, Brandon Beane, the GM of the Bills, talked about that, right? Because they asked him, trading up for a quarterback, you did it with Josh Allen. What do you say to these people, and talk about how you went through that? And he said, listen, he's like, it's going to be 2 things. Either I don't trade up for him and we don't do well, we don't get the quarterback we need, and I lose my job. Or I trade up for him and he does well, and we are where we're at. But so to him, it was like, I had to go all in. If I didn't go all in, then we wouldn't be where we are. And if I would have failed at it, then I would have lost my job anyway. So what's the difference? If I wouldn't have taken that quarterback, I probably would have lost my job. And if I take the wrong quarterback, I might lose my job, basically is what he's saying. And he's right. And I think that that's what you hear. You heard it from Antonio Pierce today from the Raiders saying, look, we got to be all in. So if our guy's there, and that's the big question, you might have the one guy you're willing to pay for. And if he's gone, then you're not going to do it. But if he's there, then you go get him. And I think that the folks around the NFL are learning because you see the teams who are successful at it and who've been doing it, and it works. So it'll be interesting. Now, speaking of NFL teams, Ryan, the last item I want to talk about with you today was the NFLPA had their press conference today. That's the Players Union, where they do their NFL player team report cards. These are, in essence, a satisfaction survey where the players judge the teams they play for on their treatment of families, the food and cafeteria, nutrition, locker room, training staff, weight room, coach, everything. You think about all the things that you do, the owner. And it was interesting because the NFL is not necessarily happy with that the NFLPA does this every year because they feel like it's not the whole story. But you look at some of these teams, not surprising. The worst rated coach was Josh McDaniels. He was fired midway through last season in Las Vegas. He got an F. There's a lot of teams here too who do well in certain areas, other teams that surprise you. And you look at things like treatment of families and you click through some of these. So I'm going to do this right now since we're on together and you're in LA, but the Rams, like treatment of families, they get a D+. Well, why? Yeah. Why do they get a D? They provide a family room at the stadium and they provide daycare on game day. That's it. Like players don't feel, or the food and cafeteria, they say it's 31st overall in taste, 20. And it's sort of like, I get these grades, and there's a lot of stories are going to come out today, including on our own website about this stuff. But it's interesting because this is a satisfaction survey, and part of me understands it because these guys spend so much time away from their families and working when it's the season. They're there all the time. So if the food sucks and there's nowhere to sit and all that kind of stuff, I get it. And so you might not be happy about it. The other side of me is like, you're complaining that childcare is $75 for the day when you make, X million dollars. Not everybody makes X million dollars, but a lot of them do. And you're complaining about $75 when the average American probably paying $350 a week or more, $800 more like it for some childcare. So it's one of those things, but it's always interesting that they release these because the coaching ones are interesting. Most owners get lower grades with the exception of, and that's just normal, I guess, for players because depending on where their contracts are and who they're at. But some interesting tidbits here just about how these teams differ because owners are different and regimes are different that run these teams. And you can see those that prioritize certain things really do get appreciation from their players.
Yeah. It's always interesting. I don't take a ton of stock with all of these. Right, wrong, or indifferent. What's funny with the family one is always interesting because you didn't what goes really into that and how much care is provided or whatever. Because everything I've talked to players on Rams and Chargers and they both have said like, oh yeah, we love the organization, they take great care of our families love it. So it's like, who are they interviewing? Are they like the bottom guys that don't get a lot of the treatment? Maybe are they not the stars? Because seems like a lot of the players are very happy with, but maybe they're just telling me that anyway. But what I found, the one that I found really interesting is strength staff.
Yeah.
Almost every single team rated their strength staffs as an A.
Yeah.
A few outliers, but A's or B's, except for the Ravens did an F-. So a team that was in the AFC Championship game, who's known as a blue collar, ground and pound, gritty, smash mouth team, gave their strength staff an F-. What do you think of that?
I know. I saw that one too, and I was like, really? Like now, and then I was interested in the Cardinals because if you remember last year, the Arizona Cardinals were charging their players for food. They still got a D+ because apparently now they're giving them a free meal on Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
So it's like, did you really do anything to change that? It does surprise me that even a cheap team like the Bengals and some of these other teams that are really known for being cheap, like, how can you not feed your guy? You're asking them to be there and the money you make, because even the smaller market teams make a crap ton of cash. So the fact that you're not feeding and making your players happy, and these are the guys that make you more money, doesn't make any sense to me. And I've seen some response from former players and some guys on TV who were former players, and they're saying, look, this is what happens when our players union and the players in the players union don't, when they have labor negotiations, don't do more. They're not willing to stick to their guns and sacrifice a little more to insist on certain things, and instead they give on them, and then you get this stuff. You shouldn't have to have a survey of your players. You should build it into the agreement so that there's a standard across all teams that, hey, everybody gets meals, everybody gets this, everybody gets that, locker room standards, all that stuff should be, in my view, part of that labor agreement. So I agree with those guys, but then I'm not a player, and suddenly, are you going to strike over that?
Yeah.
Some might and some might not. So it's always a tough thing when you're talking about labor agreements.
Yeah. What I'm curious too, I know they released also their how they grade the report cards.
Yeah.
In terms of weighted scale and whatnot. But I'm curious always with these, and this is why I don't take a ton of, and I'm not discrediting the players who did this. Obviously their opinion is absolutely worthwhile, but I'm always curious, what's the expectation too? Are they expecting the facilities to be like the Taj Mahal, the most fine china served in their cafeteria, or because again, I've been to some of these and I'm like, these are some nice facilities, and I see they got a D+ on their facility rating. I'm like, what? How is that? So I'm curious what the expectation is, and if maybe there's a player that played for one team and then went to another team, and the team he's at now, he doesn't like the facilities. He's basing on that facilities. So he grades his now currently really low. But then another player was on his current team, goes to another team. He likes those better. So he grades those differently. Who's to say what the expectation is in terms of what the thought of opinion is, I guess.
Yes.
Now, charging players is different. That obviously is going to get a bad grade, because if you get charged for food, I'm not grading an A on that. That's for sure.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, you look at that and you say, well, how many players told this? It says 1,700 players. So that is that is all the players pretty much, but it's anonymous. And this is the NFL put out a statement. It's pretty much the same statement they put out every year, which is, okay, we would love to get to substantive improvements that teams need to make, but the Players Association won't share with us how they collect the data other than just the stuff that's on the website. They won't show us the data. They won't do any of that stuff. So there's a little bit of a rub, but that's always, I guess that's, you're always going to have some rub there between the union and the owners. But interesting stuff. Check it out. I did link it in the chat area on YouTube and Facebook. So if you want to see it, you can do it there. But that's the latest from the NautZone and from the Combine. We're going to be covering the Combine the rest of the week here on sportsnaut.com. So check it out. Also great videos up. We've had videos on positions. Those will continue, I think, right through the weekend, Ryan.
Yep. Yeah. All the way through, I guess Saturday, probably Friday or Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get a sense for that. Some great content too. If you want to understand what the Combine's about, what these drills are, you can find that too, along with breaking stories that happen along the way. So we certainly appreciate you being with us. Do us a favor. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel here. If you're on Facebook, thanks for watching us as well. Make sure you like the post and share the page with your friends. Also hit that notifications bell and the thumbs up for us. We would certainly appreciate that. We will also be back next week where we'll have some performance information from some of these guys who perform on the weekends. Of course, big quarterbacks aren't going to be throwing, but there will be some players who hurt themselves and some players who help themselves, and we'll be sure to cover that here. Ryan, take care, man. I hope you feel better, and we will see you around later in the week.
Appreciate it. And yeah, I don't know if it's official, but I hope Michael Penix throws, because I'd love to see that left-handed arc at the Combine. But for yourself, thanks as always, Scott. Make sure to head over to Slippery Noodle as soon as we log off here.
Slippery Noodle, absolutely. I have to go. I mean, you told me to go. I got to go, right?
Got it.
There's
right
no
there.
question. All right. For Ryan Dyrud, I'm Scott Branson. For everybody here at Sportsnaut, thanks for being with us and for checking out our NFL Combine coverage. And we will talk to you guys